breaking news this morning is that Vladimir Putin has said about an hour and a half ago that Moscow is ready to look for diplomatic solutions over Ukraine. But at the same time, he's stressed that the country's interests are non-negotiable.
The Foreign Secretary says nothing is off the table to stop him. And she admits it's highly likely Russia is planning a move on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. And the Foreign Secretary is Liz Truss, and she joins us now. Very good morning to you, Liz Truss. It's good to see you this morning. We have heard from Vladimir Putin, who says his country is always open for direct and honest dialogue, for the search for diplomatic solutions. But I repeat, he says, the interests of Russia, the security of our citizens are unconditional. He also goes on to boast about the weapons he has in his armoury and the latest technology. Are you in any way reassured by the mention of diplomatic solutions, or should we feel threatened by the boast of new weapons?
Well, I think what he said is completely incredible. It's very clear that Russia is not taking diplomacy seriously. This week they declared and recognised two parts of the sovereign territory of Ukraine. They said Ukraine had no right to exist. They've amassed huge numbers of troops, over 100,000 on the borders of Ukraine, and they are threatening the future of Ukraine as well as broader Eastern Europe. Vladimir Putin has been very clear his aims are to turn the clock back to when the vast swathes of Eastern Europe were under Russian control. So these claims are not credible. I don't believe he is interested in diplomacy. That's why we have already launched a tough package of sanctions to respond to the recognition of those so-called republics. And it's why that if we see a full-scale invasion, which we are expecting to happen, we will hit him even harder. We will inflict real pain on Russia.
Well, we'll come on to the question of sanctions in a minute, because it's the big question of the day. But just on a more general level, how do you, your Foreign Secretary, how do you deal with a character like Putin, who is clearly a known liar? We can't trust what he says any more than we could trust what Hitler was telling us in 1938 and 1939. He just lies in his teeth. And secondly, he does appear to be, to some extent, disturbed up here. How do you deal with somebody who is the president of a country as powerful as Russia when they're like that?
Well, I believe the only thing that Putin understands is strength. And this is why we have to be strong, working with our allies, both on sanctions, also strengthening NATO. I think, to be frank, the West had its eye off the ball for a number of years. There wasn't enough spending going into defence. That's why the UK has now increased our defence spending. We encourage our allies to do similar, because that is all that Putin will understand. These diplomatic talks have not worked. He has not responded in kind. Instead, he has upped his level of threat to Ukraine. He's now said Ukraine doesn't have the right to exist. He's questioned the wider Russian influence over Eastern Europe, and we have to respond in kind.
Okay,
I do believe that strength is the only thing he understands.
What do you mean by strength, Ms. Truss? Because if it's military strength, I mean, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So if Russia puts more troops into Ukraine and there is bloodshed, what do we do about it?
Well, what we have been doing is we've been supporting the Ukrainian army. We've been helping train up soldiers. We've been supplying defensive weaponry to Ukraine, such as anti-tank missiles. We've been supplying support on their navy.
But we would leave it to Ukraine to fight back. I mean, is that strength?
As you rightly say, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. What we are doing is also bolstering support in the eastern flank. We've doubled the number of forces into Estonia, where we provide the enhanced forward presence. And we're also working to support naval capacity in the Black Sea. We are providing more air support as well.
Would we go to war with Russia?
Sorry, say that again?
Would we go to war with Russia?
That is not what we are talking about. What we're talking about here is helping Ukraine defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity, and strengthening NATO to ensure that Putin's ambitions stop here, that he is not able to win as a result of his aggression, by helping strengthening Ukraine, helping their self-defence,
Okay, so I'm not
as well
sure
as strengthening the eastern flank.
I'm not sure that that is intimidating enough for the Russian president. I mean, just, you know, I'm sure people watching would wonder whether that's going to hold him back. So therefore, you have the lever of economic sanctions.
Can I just cut in for a second?
Yes,
here?
of course.
We'll talk just before we move on to sanctions. Staying with the military, you say that we wouldn't go to war with Russia, but if he does invade and gets to Kiev, as you say, we will be supporting the Ukrainian resistance, the armed resistance. We will be arming them. We'll be giving them technical information. In a sense, we will be fighting a proxy war with Russia, won't we? Fighting it by proxy.
No, we won't. We are supporting Ukraine with defensive weapons, but they are acting in self-defense. And I think it's important to remember that the Ukrainians will fight. You know, they are a proud people. The mood in Ukraine over the last 10 years has turned hugely against the Russian regime. You know, this is not going to be easy for Vladimir Putin. They are ready to fight. I've been having discussions with the Ukrainian government, and we have been providing that support and training to Ukraine. You know, this could go on, I'm afraid to say, for years. We are likely to see a full-scale invasion, and Ukraine will fight. The point I was making is it is important that we strengthen the eastern flank of NATO countries, that we support the Baltic states, that we support other NATO members to make sure their defences are fully protected, because Putin's plans do not stop at Ukraine. That is why it's important that we see strong Ukrainian resistance, and it's also why it's important that we strengthen NATO's forces. The perverse effect of what Putin has been claiming about his security and the security of Russia is that his threatening behaviour has strengthened NATO. It's strengthened the alliance of the G7. You know, we've been very clear there will be even tougher economic sanctions in the event of an invasion to degrade the Russian economy. And it's also strengthened the desire of NATO to protect our borders as well.
OK, so sanctions announced yesterday against 5 banks, 3 individuals. One of your own colleagues, Tom Tugendhat, who is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, says the government's done nothing to stem the flow of illicit funds entering Britain, turned a blind eye to Russian money. I mean, we are dependent. Even the Tory party has received £2 million in donations from individuals linked to Russia. We're dependent on these funds, and this is a little, too late, isn't it?
Well, that isn't true. First of all, we are targeting some of the oligarchs closest to Putin. We're able to do that because of new legislation we've passed. We're targeting Russian banks, including the Russian bank that funds the military. We're also making it virtually impossible for Russia to raise sovereign debt here in the United Kingdom. We're putting territorial sanctions on the areas of the so-called independent republics. And what we're also doing is working in concert with the United States and Europe. It's very important that Putin isn't able to play divide and rule. That is why we've worked on our sanctions package to match what our allies are doing. And being clear, this is an escalatory package. So this is in response to the recognition of the so-called republics. In the event of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we have a package to go, which we've worked together with our allies on, so that Russia is in no doubt that the West will stand up strongly and will degrade the Russian economy and make it very hard for Russia to succeed economically in the international market.
Is it ever OK for a political party, particularly the political party of government, to accept millions in donations from individuals linked to the Kremlin?
Well, every donor to any British political party has to be registered on the British electoral register. And I think it's important that we distinguish between people of Russian heritage and people who are close to Vladimir Putin. The actions of Vladimir Putin do not reflect the desires of the Russian people. I'm sure Russian people do not want to go to war with Ukraine. I think we've got to be very careful about tarring everybody in Russia of Russian descent with the same brush.
We're talking about an individual whose husband was previously Putin's finance minister, who donated more than £100,000.
What I can absolutely assure you is nobody who is close to Vladimir Putin, who is propping up the Russian regime, is off the table as far as our sanctions are concerned. And we have a whole list of individuals, in addition to the 3 that we announced yesterday, that we are ready to sanction in the event of an invasion of Ukraine. And we will not hesitate to sanction anybody, make it impossible for them to travel to the United Kingdom, freeze their assets, and target those people who are close to Vladimir Putin.
Liz Truss, we're gonna have
and that is my only consideration.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it there. I have to say, for me, the most disturbing thing that I heard you say just then was that, as far as you're concerned, Putin's plans don't stop at Ukraine. That is so analogous to Hitler's plans not stopping with Czechoslovakia. And, you know, if we forget our history, we're condemned to repeat it, aren't we? Good luck with your day, and thanks for joining us.